All right, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, as the case may be. It is 11 o'clock by my watch in Chicago, so it's time to begin. Thank you for attending this PowerCast, 20 Hidden Gems of DB2 for I by Scott Forstie of IBM and Mike Stegman of HelpSystems. This PowerCast is sponsored by HelpSystems. My name is Ian Cartwright. I'm Education Manager for Common, and I appear on your screen as webcast host. If you experience any technical issues during the presentation, go ahead and send me a chat message using a chat box, which is at the center of your screen, and select to send to the webcast host. If you have questions about the presentation for Scott or for Mike, for that, you're going to use a Q&A panel, also on the lower right section of the screen, and select to send to all panelists. Mike and Scott will answer your questions at the end of the presentation as time permits. Mike Stegman and Scott Forstie are presenters today, and I'm going to hand control over to Mike at this point, and he is going to introduce himself and Scott. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Ian. Welcome to today's presentation, Hidden Gems of DB2 for I. The IBM I, of course, is the most powerful, securable, scalable system used in business today. The DB2 database is built into the operating system and adds benefit to using the IBM I and DB2. But how can you really take advantage of the system and the data? Hidden Gems will show some of the ways organizations can move forward in accessing their data. My name is Mike Stegman. I'm a senior data access consultant for HelpSystems, working primarily on the BI side. After a few different roles at HelpSystems, I'm currently focusing on webinars, articles, speaking engagements, and the like. I've been using our data access tool for over 17 years, and I've been using the IBM I since it was born as the AS400 back in 1988. And today, I'm joined by an IBM subject matter expert on DB2, Scott Forstie. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Mike. Hello, everyone. So Scott Forstie here from Rochester, Minnesota, where I lead the database DB2 for I development team. My title is business architect. Business architect means that part of my role is deciding where we focus on database enhancements. What do we build and add into the database? It's really wonderful to be included in today's session, bringing to you some of those features that maybe you haven't heard about that you can utilize as soon as the cast is over. Back to you, Mike.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott. And thanks for presenting today. And before we begin, we would like to ask a polling question of our attendees. Okay, so go ahead and make your choices there. Just a couple of questions. How do you currently access your DB2 data? All right, and select all that apply, of course. We're just trying to get a feel for like where everybody's coming from, right? Are you currently using SQL or using some other method, programs? We're just kind of like I said, we're just trying to figure out what the audience is here. All right. Go through a couple of minutes here. We're going to present the results to you all, just so you can all kind of see the same type of thing. It does help a little bit to know your audience, as they say, right? If you're a speaker, those of you who haven't been speakers may not realize this, but it is very true. So here we go. Excellent. So it looks like majority are using SQL in some way. RPG is still up there, and Query 400 is coming in as third. All right, so we have our silver, bronze, and gold medalists there, if you will. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone, for replying to that. We will have a couple more questions down later on in the presentation, just kind of see what's going on. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Scott. It's all yours.
Okay, great. All right, let's jump into 20 hidden gems at DB2 for I. With the help from HelpSystems, I narrowed the list. There are more than 20 hidden gems. So we'll focus on the 20 that I selected for us today. When I went through them, I was trying to find maybe a variety of different kinds of gems. I thought we'd have different roles and attendees today. So hopefully something for everyone. But you might be wondering, what's a hidden gem? This is a topic that's been developed by myself and Allison Butterell, our senior program offering manager, and some of my other IBM colleagues. You may have seen this presentation at a conference, and any IBM I conference might have had a Hidden Gems content in it. Hidden Gem is all about explaining to you something that already exists in IBM that maybe you didn't know about it. So that's the hidden part. The gem part is it valuable, right? So for database, we've been enhancing this database at such a rapid pace. It's difficult for clients to keep up with every different enhancement. The other barrier I see to adoption of technology is maybe we did a real good job of talking about an enhancement when we added it, but that's not the same time as when you're ready to use it. So then by the time you're at the enabling level, you need to hear the information again. So hopefully I'll connect some dots here for people, be able to utilize what you own and get more out of it. That's greater ROI, which is a really good thing. So with that, I'm going to go through some 20 topics now, and I'll do my level best to behave and finish on time so that Mike can ask some more polling questions and wrap us up with some Q&A. The first stop on this journey through database hidden gems is procedures and functions. In this case, I'm not limiting it to just SQL, but a procedure is something you call and you get a result back. So same thing with a function. They have some commonalities and differences. The hidden gem part here is create based on. Have you ever heard of that? Do you utilize that? We added it years ago for a specific use case, but I've found that most people don't even know it exists. So that's why it's our leading hidden gem. What you see in front of you now is an Access Client Solutions graphical interface into the database. This is something that's known as schemas. So when you launch up ACS, you'd have to drill into schemas. And a schema is an SQL term for a library. So that's the SQL schema, corresponds to a library. And I've expanded it here to look at procedures only. Under each database folder, you see all the different database object types, or you can look at all objects. In this case, I'm looking at procedures. I see existing procedures, and there's an action under new called based on, create based on. The whole concept here, and the reason why we added this capability is we wanted to make it easier for you to create that next procedure, that next function. And as programmers, what is the first thing we look to do when we're creating something new? We're looking for something that we can model, something that we can say, make it similar to that, and now I'm going to adjust it. So don't start from scratch. If you can find something that's similar and then make adjustments, and this tool will let you do it graphically. So new based on. What you do here is you go through a series of tabs in a dialog. So I first have found that this procedure, delete_1, is as close as I can find to the new procedure I want to create. So now this graphical dialog will let me customize it, which you have to do, right? You have to give it a new name, and you probably want to change some of the attributes, characteristics, or logic within that procedure. So you can see highlighted in the top of this screen, procedure, parameters, options, routine body. I'm going to take you through these slides, and that's what's going to change. It almost looks like a tab. It's a way to select the different parts of a procedure. I can add and subtract parameters. We see it's all graphically based. If I don't remember what all the data types are, I'll see that when I go into add. And I won't have to spend my time with that wonderful SQL reference book to overcome and understand what is the valid syntax for some of these topics. On options is where this gets really interesting, because there are many options within procedures and functions. How many of those options are important? Okay, well, almost all of them. There are some of them that are maybe less frequently used, but as far as getting your code to work correctly, that functional aspect, or perform correctly, okay, we care about both. Let's choose the right options. And you can see there's other characteristics that I can control on this new procedure that I'm creating. But if you pay attention to that set option statement, you can see it actually scrolls off the bottom of the screen. We can't see it all because there are so many options. But in this dialog, there's a helper function. That modify button is going to help us. Let's take a look at that, and we see an advanced dialog. Now the screen is lit up with options. So we can go one by one through these and make a determination of what is the correct option to use. If we don't understand what some of these topics mean, then we'll look at our desk companion, the SQL reference, and further understand what SQL rules, what are those, system time, SQL path, and so on and so forth. If we make all of these changes, then select OK. That'll be telling Access Client Solutions that we're done configuring the options, and our changes will be set in the higher level as follows. After options, we can go into the routine body. So this is what do they refer to it as? The bread and butter. This is the logic of the procedure. It's primed with whatever you said create it based upon. So this is great. Now we get some compound statements, those begins and ends. We get declarative variables, continue handlers, and then the actual code logic. This dialog is editable, so you can be typing in here, copying and pasting, all that's valid. It's possible that you'll make a syntactical error, but you can check syntax as you go to make sure you're still have a valid set of SQL. There's even, you see the examples, allows you to pull in different examples of how to code SQL into this dialog. So maybe not, you maybe not get to end of job or completed your procedure routine body in this initial creation, but you can make some initial set of changes and then work from there. But before you press OK on the lower right hand, please understand that there's an important button on the lower left hand, Show SQL. And we see Show SQL appear in many places in Access Client Solutions as you work through database changes. Adding a column to a database, you can tell ACS to give you back the alter table statement instead of saying OK. So this is a way of extracting the SQL that would match the action you're about to take. So which one is the correct one to take? Well, that's your choice. Now that you understand Show SQL, I'm sure you will look to be using that in some cases, because we like to have the master source for what we're about to do. If I clicked on Show SQL, I get the following. Now this is just an image of the Run SQL Scripts dialog that will pop up. It will be populated with the full create procedure that you've just gone through the trouble of building. It gives you an active connection to the IBMI that once you were working with. So you're good to go here. You could execute this create procedure, or perhaps you'll make some further adjustments, or hopefully save it away, right? We want to save our source. And now through this, people whom perhaps are not experts in procedure and functions can get going, can have a better experience in creating and changing procedures and functions with new based on our first hidden gem. So what's next? Let's go into SQL Application Development. Again, I'll begin with an Access Client Solutions dialog. This is known as SQL Performance Monitor. For that monitor, there's a wizard that gets utilized when you create a new monitor. The idea here is SQL Performance Monitor, which was previously known as Database Monitor, is a database application trace. So a monitor equates to trace. There'll be data collected for every database action, every SQL that's executed based upon your filter criteria. And this monitor wizard shows us the full complement of filter criterias that you can specify. The more things you specify, the less data you're collecting. Now, I've chosen a special one for us, the SQL code. So the SQL code is the result of the SQL statements, where 0 is unqualified success, negative is an error, and positive is a warning. In this case, I'm typing in a value, negative 913 or 913. That SQL code corresponds to my SQL statement failed because I was unable to get the lock I needed. So it's a special case. And what I found in some scenarios is that under a normal kind of QA environment, the lock failures don't occur, but under maybe a high speed spike scenarios in production environments, you could see a 913. And there's explanations of why that would occur, whether their file wait timeout is set to a certain value. How do we debug these things? This tool can help us solve difficult problems. Let's look at an alternative to ACS. So if you liked what you saw there, being able to collect that database application trace for an interesting subset, then maybe you utilize the following. The start dbmon command basically does the same thing, and it has the same set of filters. So in this case, I'm not looking for only the 913, but I'm looking for any error, those SQL codes that are less than 0. My concept here is, how do you test the next version of your software? Well, of course, you have maybe automated and manual tests that you run to validate it. One more thing you could consider adding to your QA environment is this very script. Starting a database monitor over one job or all jobs. This one just says one job, but you could cast a wide net over all jobs and say, I only want to see those things that are failing. Why might we want to do this? Well, 2 reasons come to mind. First one is this is an easy way to see what's failing and why. Second is I've seen many times customers have applications written such that they are constantly encountering failures. And maybe the application's overcoming that, or it could be that those failures are knocking on a door that nobody's answering. And with this insight, we can say, oh, well, that explains a few things. If we'd only seen that kind of surface up through the application, we would have done something about it. Well, you don't have to have it always surface up through the application if you utilize a technology like I'm showing here. So this could be an automated process because it's command-based, SQL-based. So the first part is starting the monitor, and then for some period of time you end it. Lastly, then retrieving means you're extracting the details of any failures that occurred. So extract statements, this could actually count as 2 hidden gems. I'm not sure if my counting system is correct here, but call QSys2 extract statements, and you're pointing to what is the physical file we used as the output for the database monitor, and we're pulling out the detail of these failures. So great techniques. I hope you enjoy those, and that helps solve some mysteries, at least makes your productivity boost using SQL. Let's shift over to something called Generate SQL. Generate SQL is something that you can do through ACS or through SQL. The idea with Generate SQL is to ask the database to give to you the SQL that would be needed to execute to produce the object that you're pointing to. Or, and like I'm showing on the screen, an entire library's worth of objects. So we can extract the data definition language, the DDL, that would correspond to the objects that exist Will it give you the data within those objects? No, it gives you the data model constructs, the actual objects, the crates needed to build what you pointed to. Now on the screen, I'm highlighting that when you choose Generate SQL, you have some choices to make. So the right-hand side of the screen shows you options. So you have to choose to go to options, and then you can add and subtract different things. You're directing the database in how you want that information generated. And I've intentionally unchecked schema qualified names for objects. And the idea here is similar to create based on. Let's say instead of creating a new procedure or function, I want to create an entire new project. Okay, the project includes a data model, database objects in a library. So go out and find a library that most closely matches the project that you want to create. Then go to ACS and generate SQL, but uncheck schema qualified names for objects. We will take out the library qualification from all the SQL that's going to be generated, making it easy for you to create a new library or a new schema with all the same objects without their data, but your data model is there intact. So big time saver if you know that exists, and now you do. Anything you can do in ACS, you typically can also do with SQL directly. So as incredible, awesome, and powerful as what that previous slide was, maybe there are applications where you want to have a programmatic solution, like a script. In this case, we can call a procedure generate _SQL and do the same thing, except it can go one step further because there's a constraint option, and you can see it at the bottom of the screen where you can pass in two. Two is an indicator to generate SQL that you would like to see the DDL needed to create the employee table, and you want that DDL to have create or replace included, and you want the constraints that are on the employee table to be part of the create table statement. If you don't choose this option, the create table is followed by a series of alter table statements. So we can generate the perfect create table statement with generate SQL. And it would look like the following. We see that the beginning of the create table statement includes that or replace. And then we have a sequence of columns and then our constraints. One of the reasons why this is useful is the idea of making changes to your table becomes very simple if you have the master source. When you use create or replace table, the database is discerning how is the new table different from the existing table, and the database implements the perfect alter table statement to accomplish the transition from before or current to the new. If you don't have the master source, then you can't do that. So extract the master source using the technique I showed on the previous slide, and then save it. This is a valuable asset to the business. Let's have control over our DDL, and then change management of it becomes simple. We can add a column in here and then just play or execute this statement, and the database will do the perfect alter table. 1/4 of the way through Hidden Gems, amazing. What would it look like if you utilize this to go a different direction? Instead of using it to more easily change the file, we can also utilize this to convert from DDS to SQL DDL. It's a little bit surprising until you've seen it, and it's just downright simple using this technology, because you're pointing the database to DDS created physical files and logicals or physicals, and the database will generate what you ask for. And then by the end of that construct, you will have SQL DDL. let's move on into something called flexible views. What's a flexible view? Well, the first way to know what a flexible view is to understand what an inflexible view is, otherwise known as a traditional view. Traditional views are ways to encapsulate a query in a permanent form. A logical file or SQL view, it contains a query, and it directs the database to access certain tables and rows. That's all well and good and works great. But what if I have situations where I want flexibility of which rows return? If you don't use a flexible view, you have to create n number of traditional views with different where clauses. So a flexible view is possible if we utilize DB2 global variables. And a global variable will determine which rows get found when the view is queried. That's how it's flexible. What's an example of this? Well, we see it in the screen in front of us. Create or replace variable will create a variable named my_department. It's an integer, and it has a default value. The default value is an expression, which in this case is a query, which will do a lookup in the employee table, finding the department number. What department number will it find? Well, the department number that corresponds to the current user of the variable. So we can assign that, more or less hidden from view, pardon the pun, by utilizing this global variable. Once I have that variable created, I can encapsulate it within a view. Remember, a view is just a query, a permanent form of a query. The view does not contain rows. It contains an access plan for how the database should find the rows. In this case, that access plan is flexible because the where clause has where department number, which is a column, equals my department. Well, what's the value of my department? It depends on who you are. That's in that way, it is flexible. And of course, we tested it on the third one. Third part of this is just a query showing that our view indeed returns rows based upon who is using that view. Another hidden gem of database is priced options. And this is kind of maybe a little bit of a surprise here because clients are used to all the database features, DB2i features being included within DB2. You don't have to pay anything more for them. You move to 7.2, you can use row permissions and column masks. You move to IBM i 7.3, you can use temporal tables and generated columns. You move to 7.4, more features and functions. Well, there is a side topic. There are a few licensed programmed options that are priced, meaning that you have to pay to use them. My colleague Rob Bestien and I, we manage a program that allows clients to evaluate these options before entering a purchase agreement. So option 26 is DB2 SMP, symmetric multiprocessing. That option can be used to accelerate data access. So long-running database operations, either at the data model level or queries, you can have an instant boost in total elapsed time using option 26. Option 27, maybe not perfectly named for its use. DB2 multi-system actually allows, it's an enabling piece to allow you to use SQL partition tables. Tables where we're organizing rows across different members within a file. So you can have a much larger file, or you can organize those rows for effective management of rows. That's the enabling piece. Both of these are priced options. If you'd like to evaluate any of them, either of them or both of them, all you need to do is send an email to Rob or myself, and we will help you along the way. Managing database change in production. Well, this is so critical and not always easy to accomplish. Why? Well, most of the time to manage any change in production, you need an exclusive lock. An exception to this rule is allow DDL changes while open, a QA, QQ, INI control that you can optionally use to break the rules. In this case, we're breaking the rules of getting that exclusive lock to make changes to trigger programs. And I usually show a sequence of operations here, but I decided to just go to the last example of the time sequence of if I were creating or replacing a trigger program and I use allow DDL changes while open, what would it look like? Well, those users who have an active data change that matches what should fire the trigger program are still using the old trigger program until they close their cursor. Any new data access, of course, is going to use the new trigger program. As soon as the use count of the old trigger program goes to 0, it is deleted by the operating system. So there's no disruption in service of your trigger programs. There's a shift from using the old to the new based upon the criteria I just explained. So you don't have to wait for a software maintenance window to utilize this, which is great. You can move ahead with trigger program changes as soon as you need to. There's many ways to go about saying you want to break the rules and use allow DDL changes while open. The traditional approach would be use the change query a command, where you're using the QA, QQ, INI and some library of your choice where you've configured it to use yes for allow DDL changes while open. Alternative approach would be to use just SQL in your script. If you call override QA, QQ, INI with one saying, I'm about to override changes, so we inherit the rules that you currently are using into a new QA, QQ, INI, and QTemp, so it's only for your job, then you can have a series of calls to override QA, QQ, INI with 2, where you're saying which things you want to override with some value you supply. So of course, in this case, we're using allow DDL changes while open, star yes, the default is star no. And then if we followed that with our create or replace trigger program, we're not going to attempt to get the exclusive lock. So that then this would never fail because you can't get the exclusive lock. And there's a link to some detail that I shared on Don May's blog about this if you want to read more about it. But I think I've explained the concept at a high level and even given you an example of how to go about doing it. So with that, let's shift into implicit remote database access. A topic near and dear to my heart. I've been using this since the inception because it allows you to do some pretty nifty things with SQL across your IBMIs, and not just limited to your IBMIs. The whole idea here is database to database access. On DB2 for I, there's one instance of DB2 that's always there on IBMI. You don't install it or turn it on or off, but you might want to interact with other IBMIs or other databases to have a single point of collection of data for different purposes or for analytics or any other topic you want to jump into. DB2 for I supports both the DRDA standard for application requester or application server, meaning that you can be the one asking for the data or you can be the one asked to provide the data. Either way is possible. Another link to another resource. But let's get some real examples going here. How do I do 3-part name with database? Well, first part is understanding what is a 3-part name. 3-part name begins with the database name. Typical SQL might have 1-part name where you're utilizing the library list or set schema to tell us which library or schema to go into. 3-part name, the first part of the name is what relational database do you want us to be working with for this statement. There's a requirement that you can only have one remote database specified in any SQL statement. like any requirement, there's some exceptions to the rule that I'll show you in just a second. And in this slide, we see some examples of three-part names. From my IBMI, I can create a table on a different IBMI. I tell the database, go to this fancy X1423P2 IBMI, create it over there in library or schema toy store, create the employee table. When the database sees the three-part name, what we're going to look for is your relational database directory entry. We're looking to match that name and say like, okay, well, what is the remote location for this database? We'll establish a DRDA connection to it. We'll send your SQL statement across. We'll execute it, and then return control back to your job and reestablish the connection to the local database. So a lot of the connection management, okay, all of the connection management is happening behind the scenes, making that part easy. We can even do DML inserts or queries. Breaking the rules. Okay, so there's a couple ways to break the rules. First one is if I'm creating a table locally, I can choose to have the data access remotely. So create table as with data. The inner part is a query. It says, okay, what data am I creating in this table? I'll execute this query on a different IBMI. So behind the scenes, we're discerning the format of that table, so we know what file to create, what table to create in DataLib, and then we're bringing back the data. And in one step, we've established that local table using remote data. So break the rules with create table as, declare global temporary table as, and insert with remote subselect. Those are the ways to kind of bend or break the rules of a single RDB in any SQL statement. You can also go another level to this. You can have database transparency through aliases. An alias is an SQL construct. It says, I'll have one name that corresponds to a different name. So the alias name is just that. All it is a way to write your SQL code and scripts such that it's not hard-coded to the actual database table name. You can also go a step beyond. You can hide from your programs and scripts which RDB, relational database, is working with. And this sequence of SQL statements, actually, if you look at the inserts are identical, but they do something different because between those inserts, we changed what does the alias refer to. So in this way, I can write a script or program that's going to go out to many different remote databases and collect data. Powerful stuff. A smaller but quite enjoyable enhancement for me is table functions. We no longer mandate that you have the correlation name. The correlation name used to be required. It's in this example, the character F. When you query a table function, we used to force you to name that table function. Okay, how do we refer to the columns in that table? Well, in this query, we don't need to refer to the columns in the table because we're not joining with any other table and we don't have any ambiguous references. So after that, the after is if you're at the latest DB2 PTF group levels, you don't have to specify that F. So it's a little bit easier to code the table functions, which is a nice thing for the SQL user. Hot diggity dog, that's what I said when I got that enhancement. Good job. Table functions and three-part names. This is where we can start to use this hybrid technology of three-part and remote database access with IBMI services. IBMI services are alternatives to the tried and true IBMI CL commands and APIs. History log info is an example of that. It's a user-defined table function, UDTF, that returns to you the information you would find from the display log, display log command. History log info, by default, will give you today and yesterday's history. If we want to have a different time span, then we pass in parameters to history log info. And this query is returning those same messages you'd see under the display log for the current partition where the job exists. We can go and through a little bit of SQL, adding in a where clause. The where clause in this case is not reducing the rows returned. Usually the where clause is what's known as a predicate. It reduces the number of rows returned. In this case, we're utilizing the where clause to push that UDTF to a different RDB. So even though I didn't list this one as an example of where you can break the rules, I just showed you one more way you can break the rules. The history log information is now going to be captured from a remote database, remote IBMI, and returned to the local job. Let's shift over to Access Client Solutions. I've already mentioned it a few times. There's some more hidden gems that I want to make sure that you see. And not all of these are strictly limited to database. ACS is my tool of choice for so many topics. Here are some of the ones that I think everybody should know about. First is, if you're like me, you have far too many windows open. It seems like when it's time that I finally have to reboot my my workstation, it's just a dreadful moment because I have all these windows I have to deal with. The dilemma with having so many windows open is it's easy to misplace a window or forget which window you're working with, and you can make mistakes. So ACS has some technologies that will help you overcome this. First one is on the 5250, you can have watermarks. Watermarks will be controlled by you, either text or image that will remind you what is this connection connected to. So it's remembering when you do a watermark, whenever I connect to that IBMI, okay, I want to see this as my watermark. In this example, I put production, in this text across the background, just to remind myself, okay, be extra careful. I'm on a production box, and maybe I have to avoid going super fast like I like to go. Hidden Gem 14 shows you, well, what about the SQL user? SQL user shouldn't be on the 5250. Okay, yes, we saw in the poll, query 400 is widely used. I'm so happy that you didn't put start SQL on there, so thank you for that, Mike. I understand people use what they know, but more and more users should be on not only ACS, but also run SQL scripts. That is the best place to be using SQL with your IBMI. Wonderful development environment, and has so many features you won't find anywhere else. For example, this custom border settings. This is another reminder to you as to what you're connected to. In this case, I chose a couple things. I chose to have a border color and some text at the top. You can see it's production box. Be careful. That text could appear at the bottom. So there are some different controls you can utilize there. What did I choose here? Oh yeah, delete from production table without a where clause. Oops. This is not just in jest. I get contacted by all kinds of IBM and DB2 for I users, and I appreciate that, enjoy that. But I had one person contact me and said, "Well, Scott, yeah, we were on production and we forgot the where clause on our delete. What are some of our options?" So, that's the chuckle about it, but it's some heavy stuff, right? Data in production is pretty important topic, and this tool is going to help us in different ways. So utilize those features, and you'll have a much better experience. New to Content Assist. Okay, wait a second. This isn't old, but it's out there. It's been out there since November of last year. It's going to be enhanced soon. Content Assist. One of the reasons I've heard people say that they continue to use Start SQL instead of run SQL scripts is because Start SQL has the ability to prompt into PF4 into objects and column names. We heard you. So now we have the same thing. Okay, it's better in Access Client Solutions. Better is a bold statement. Well, this is a webinar. I can make those statements. I've got proof. It's in front of us. It's not only the field names. You also see the SQL column names. You can optionally choose to see the data types and the labels for those objects too. They're all in front of us. How did I get that dialog to pop up? The control and hold control down and press spacebar. The first time you use Content Assist, it'll be just a little bit slower than every other time because we have to go out to whatever objects you're utilizing and we pull in the metadata related to them so it can pop up in front of the screen. Now that data is cached. So the first time you use it for your SQL will be a little bit slower. The second through the last time will be super, super fast because we've got that data resident and cached. In the bottom of this text or this slide, you can see there's F5 for refresh and F11 for system names. F11, of course, I'm looking at SQL names. If you want to see the field names, press F11. It's just a toggle back and forth. Keep pressing F11, you could change it. F5 is going to say, all right, well, we made some changes to our database. Let's get a fresh view of things. The other way to do an F5 is just to get a fresh connection. So, Content Assist. Formatting. This one's been there for a good long while, but this is useful in so many ways. Yeah, formatting might seem like an esoteric thing, but ACS's formatter uses the SQL parser. It's actually calling into the operating system, and we parse your SQL, so it fully understands it. That's how it's smart enough to know that select should have color blue, and that the text following that is in black because those are column names. Oh, we get back to terminology. From, that's lit up in blue. So this is going to be a time saver. So stop manually formatting your SQL code, and it's going to be a time saver for syntactical problems, syntax errors, because it's going to identify the exact point where your SQL became invalid. So use this interface and formatter to save you time. And isn't that the point of tools? Is to help us be more productive? Hidden Gem 19, we're getting there, Mike, so be ready. One of the things that I didn't like about ACS was, what if I execute a query and it returned more than a couple rows? In this example, more than 100 rows. To paint the screen as fast as possible, most of the users want to see rows getting returned. So we give you the first 100 rows returned as quickly as we can do it. But then we tell you that more data is available. Prior to this enhancement, you would have to keep scrolling through those rows. And when you got past 100, we would go fetch some more. And then you scroll some more, we fetch some more. Sometimes you want to see all the rows. So that's going to take a little bit more processing. So we give you an option. It's in the lower right-hand corner, retrieve all rows. So if that icon goes lit up, if it turns blue, you have the option of saying, just go fetch them all. You can click on it, and then we'll do that. After you click on it, if you change your mind, you can click on it again. We'll stop fetching the rows. So this is actually found throughout ACS in any place where we're returning database rows. So look for that little icon in the lower right-hand corner, and that can help your experience through this interface. Okay, so we're to Hidden Gem number 20, and this one is actually a compound hidden gem. It's showing you the URL that you can use to go to GitHub, which has support for this thing called gists. Gists are a way to share information and examples. And for almost a year now, I've been utilizing it to share the answers I give when customers ask me questions. And I usually challenge people, anytime anybody wonders whether something is possible using SQL on IBM, your default answer should be yes. And if you get stuck along the way, give me a shout out and I'll give you my view on the topic. So I think there's over 40, in a year's time. That's not so bad, right? That's 40 in a year. Questions that have been answered by me of real IBM clients who are trying to get things done for a purpose using SQL. Now, if you go out there, I've included the actual SQL script for every one of the gists, and it's usually preceded by a short introduction. So hopefully there's enough commentary to elaborate on it. In the GitHub gists, there's room for comments. So if you want to comment, you can comment on there and the whole community will see it. And perhaps you can find some things that you find useful there. It's a little different than ACS's insert from examples, which are working examples of SQL. This one is questions that have been answered, and you have the companion SQL to get the job done. So with that, I've wrapped up the 20 hidden gems, and I'm going to turn it back to Mike for more polling questions and other parts.
Sorry about that. I muted the wrong person. Mike and Scott, you should be you should have your line open. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, go ahead. You're in control, Mike. Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Ian.
Mike, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. I think you might have been muted.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The poll's
Looked like I
open.
was
Go ahead.
unmuted. So let me back up then. Thanks a lot, Scott. That was a lot of good, useful information. Really appreciate your insight there on SQL, et
You're
cetera.
welcome.
Excuse me. And before we get to my little presentations and the Q&A, I saw a bunch of Q&A comes in. I have one more polling question here. If you all can just take a couple minutes to, or a minute to go ahead and just, select all that apply. If you're looking for something, right, where do you go? Just, you do a Google search? Do you go to IBM? Do you go, do you talk mainly to user groups, conferences, et cetera? You go to your business partners, those kind of things. We're just kind of get a feel, kind of just knowing where people are coming from. Again, just kind of a little bit of information, right? We're talking database, so anybody can can get in there and proceed with that. So we're just kind of talking about that. I'm going to move on then. So another tool, in addition to what Scott has been already talking about, we have a tool called SQL. Okay, it's as you can see here, flexible, simple, modern tool accessing data on IBM. You can also go to other databases as well. I always think end results, right? When I'm building something, I always think, what am I doing here? What am I, not just where the data is or how to get it. First, I think of kind of the back end of it. What am I going to do with the end result? Or what is the user going to end with the results? So when you're building your SQL statements, you want to think about that information. How are you going to get the information to a business user? Right? So SQL is a powerful yet flexible tool. It's relatively simple to use, even for non-SQL experts, right? To provide their users with a modern look at your data. Okay? So Scott showed some really interesting functions and some of the different things here. These are just a couple that I've pulled out of our example databases here. So just how to access your data, right? Using IBM native SQL. Okay, so we're just out here looking at it. We have an SQL tab. We have a graphical way for some of this. We also have a different way to do it using this the select clause you have right here. So again, think with the end in mind. So if you're going to build it, how are you going to deliver it to the user, right? How about a dashboard, right? You want them to access it from a browser using a dashboard. You can do that. I'll have an example of that coming up here in just a minute. This is another example. Just some of the other things that you can do with this. Using native IBM DB2 SQL syntax to access your data, and you're using our SQL tool, right? that you're using the SQL. Both of these happen to be doing unions if you glance at them real quickly, but they're also doing other things as well. There's another couple of examples. Some of the time when you design your definitions, you can use it from a graphical, like I said, files and fields tab, we call it, which is a click and drag and drop ways, which helps some of the non-SQL experts, maybe somebody who gets intimidated when they see all the blue and the black on here and they're going, what do I put here? How do I do that? So the graphical way is kind of a good way to do that. Sometimes you have to stay on here if it's a really complicated ones, but some of the ways we have flexibility within the tool is having things like, I think Scott's touched on this a little bit here. We have variables or prompts, runtime prompts. So built into the SQL statement, you just tell the SQL statement, I need to ask the user at runtime for some information, right? An account number, some information. One of the things I think Scott talked about going out to a database file. You can do that. This one here is actually going to prompt the user to do that, and you can control what the user gets prompted for as well. So when you're delivering it, how do you do some of this stuff? Well, here's just a quick example of how it could be delivered to a user, right? I took some of those examples from the previous slides and put them onto a dashboard, right? They're just relatively simple. A lot of times dashboard or summary information, as you can see at the bottom of the screen here, sometimes they're in charts and graphs, things like that. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I do want to get to the questions. I saw a bunch of them coming in here, but you have the ability to do that. So customizable dashboards with buttons take users to other data or to other dashboards. SQL can provide that and a whole lot more. And again, we've only touched the surface of what SQL can do. If it's an interactive dashboard like this one here, the user can click on data and drill into it, right? They can click on buttons and go to other ways. Sometimes the dashboards are just meant to be set for auto refresh, put on a large screen on a production floor or a sales room floor and get updated every so often. So nobody has to ever touch it. It's not meant to be interactive, but everybody can see the status of the current data. Okay, and business users, like I said, it's customizable, completely customizable, so you can see different types of gauges, graphs, data, buttons, etc. So we just want to show some of the different examples of various SQL options. So again, thinking with the end in mind, thinking flexibility, you still have the power of SQL, getting to the data, getting that data into the hands of the business user. How's the best way to go about it? Sometimes some of our SQL customers do it just for behind the scenes. Developers go in and create warehouse type data, work files, if you will, something like that. You can access all that. And like I said, remote database access as well. And that kind of wraps up my thing. And we just touched on the surface of SQL here. So we are going to ask one more polling question here before we get to the actual Q&A, is if there's anything HelpSystems can do. So got your 5 options there. Just go ahead and take a minute or so just to check that, and then we'll get to the Q&A. I've seen a lot of pop-ups here from chats and Q&A. Hopefully we can get to many of them. I think we have the ability, if we don't, to follow up after the fact. So we'll try and do that as well. But we'll get to as many as we can here. Most of them I'll probably have to defer to our subject matter expert, Scott. So be ready for some questions coming in, and we'll get to them in just a moment here. So like I said, go ahead and take just a moment to do the polling question. If there's anything we can have, like I said, we have a lot of tools within the HelpSystems umbrella, from security and automation, including the BI side where I work at, that can help a lot of customers, a lot of businesses throughout the world get to their data. All right. Now we'll jump into any questions. Throw it back to our webcast host, Mr. Ian.
All right, Mike, thanks. Send in questions using Q&A panel, which is on the right frame of your screen. Select to send to all panelists. We are at the end of the hour. I will say a couple things. If anybody needs to jump out, has a hard stop at the end of the hour, that's fine. Be aware that we are recording the event, so we'll be able to send a recording and a PDF of the handout to everybody, and that should be available from tomorrow. I'll send an email from the common website. I'm sorry, from a common server when that's available. So questions now, Q&A panel, right frame of the screen. Where should we start? There are quite a few questions.
Ian, I can marshal through them if you'd prefer.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been reading them a little bit while Mike was doing his bit. Is the crate based on support supposed to replace Store Procedure Builder and Data Studio? I view all the things you can do in ACS as an alternative to Data Studio. So this is more of, pick which your technology you prefer. Now that you know that one more thing has been added to ACS for a development environment, you can just factor that in. Can flexible views be created over a flexible set of members? Remember, my default answer is yes, so always go with that. How do you utilize it? Well, one approach for that would be to not use a global variable, but have your view query a user-defined table function. The table function includes logic to decide which members to grab, and the consumer, the user of the view, is none the wiser. Flexible. If you get stuck along the way, ask me to create a gist for it. I will. Is there a way to see if a file has allow DDL changes while open, or to get a list of files that has yes? So the answer again is yes. In this question, we're looking for QAQQINI files that exist across all the different libraries, and we want to see which ones of those are configured to no and which ones yes. And so you would have a query that finds the files first, and then another part of the query that drills into that column within the file, the row within the file, and finds this information. If you utilize the QAQQINI file and QUsersys, you've affected across the default behavior across all IBMI. So the answer is yes, and the same offer of help is, as I mentioned on the previous request. Implicit remote database access, DRDA, can it be used DB2 running under Linux on Power? The DRDA is fully supported by all the DB2 families. So that from DB2 on Linux, Unix, and Windows, otherwise known as LUW, you can query data on DB2 for I, or the opposite direction from IBMI and DB2 for I, you can reach out to a Linux box and pull data. Right? So either direction is possible, because that slide that I showed that indicates who supports application requester, who supports application server. 2 thumbs up on content assistant formatter work. Well, thank you very much. We are in ACS, we're very much community driven. What you want, we try to focus on. So keep those letters and notes coming, and thank you for the encouragement. I'll share that with the team. My content assist shows the column names in uppercase and doesn't show data types and links. I'm on 7.2. Is that why? No, it's not IBMI operating system really specific. It's more of what ACS level you have. So somebody else had asked what ACS level supports content assist. It's 1.183, the version that came out in November. It will be updated again very soon to one number higher than that. So your column names, the uppercase, doesn't show the data types and links. Well, there's going to be a control added that allows you to say whether you want the data types and links. So I'm previewing what you don't have in that sense. The first version of Content Assist is available, not quite as good as the one I showed, but will be soon. Ian already explained how the materials will be available. Content Assist F4 to show a list of columns. Which version? Oh, okay, I just said that one. Is there a simple way to execute an SQL select from within a CL program and generate a spool file natively? From within a CL program, you can use the run SQL command, and in that command, you can do a create table as with the select statement.
One thing I'd like to add on that one, if I could, I saw that one as well, because the second part of that, he goes, I know SQL is able to do that, but a few of his LPARs don't have SQL. Remote database, is the other option too. You can pass through using, if you have SQL, you can just create a remote database entry to go across and reach out to your other I, and then you can do your SQL statements that way. So some options there.
Okay, great. Thanks for adding that. Just time for a couple more. Can you loop through the results of a select statement to run other SQL statements in ACS? Not sure I understand the full scenario there. The way ACS run SQL scripts works is that it's going to be sitting on the current statement until that statement's done. In a query, you're given the result sets, and you can undock that result sets into a separate window, and then you've created an environment where ACS could continue on to the next statement, and you won't lose your result sets. So hopefully that was close to the question there.
And one more I'd like to add on that too is
Great.
SQL does have something like that. Our tool SQL, it has a command within there where you can generate an SQL statement through a script, and then it would loop through another sub SQL, if you will, while it's running that SQL to do multiple different things. So we have a command for that within our tool that you can put into a script that can be generated. So.
Oh. Last question was really a comment, something positive about the gist. So thanks for that. I just published 2 gists this week. So if you haven't gone out there before, so enjoy, and thanks for the encouragement.
Yep, I saw that too, Scott. And I was going to say the same thing. It's like, yeah, I'm starting to look at those. So keep those coming. Those are pretty good. And if anybody else has any questions, you can always reach out to Scott and myself directly, I'm sure. But keep that information coming, and we'll see what we can do.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We're a bit over, but there were some good questions there. I was glad to go through them. So great presentation, Mike and Scott. Everybody, have a great day, and look for the replay and PDF tomorrow in your inbox. Have a good day.